Hello, and welcome to Michael's Minty Music for today. Today we are reviewing We Like Digging by Cars Flowers with the question mark. Um, I'm not going to pronounce the question mark because it'll be very confusing. For those unaware, Cars Flowers eventually changed their name to Maroon 5, so this is basically Maroon 5. There was slight lineup changes as well, but it's mostly the same people. Um, Obviously, Adam Levine and the pretty much all of them by their. I think they only switched out one person for their Maroon 5's debut album. Um, so this is kind of the first Maroon 5 album because this is Cars Flowers' first album. This album's not great, but it's not too terrible. And I'd like to thank the YouTube channel Cars Flowers Archive for uploading this full album because it's very relatively niche and thus not really available online. So I'll link them in the description. I'll link that channel. This is the track listing, 11 tracks, and these are the tracks I added to my playlist. 7 out of the 11, which is probably a lot more than this album deserves. It's interesting, but you have to approach it with the perspective that this is a bunch of like kids in a garage just kind of messing around. As long as you keep that in mind, the album's okay. It's still probably not great. The individual music is interesting, but it's also unpolished, that it's difficult to really enjoy the songs on the album. There are obviously no singles off of this album and no radio songs. And my favorite song here is probably Minor. It's one of the few songs on the album which I think may actually stand up to Maroon 5's later work. A lot of this is just not polished enough to even be sort of stand up to actual songs that they made later. Obviously, as this is the only Cars Flowers album I've listened to so far, this album is the only spot in the ranking. But in regards to ranking this with Maroon 5's albums, I think this goes at the bottom. Not even under even Hands All Over and Red Pill Blues, some of their worst albums. I mean, listening to this album, I'm not surprised that Maroon 5 eventually took off because it's got interesting ideas in it, but I'm also not surprised that this album didn't do well because this album is not it's really just unpolished and not it hasn't got the time and work that full professional artists usually put into albums. Now, obviously, this doesn't take my top spot from 1995. Queen's Made in Heaven is just so much better than We Like Digging. Like, Made in Heaven is an actual good album, to say the least. And We Like Digging's not bad, but it's definitely I would probably would not say that it is good. Um, so yeah, it's kind of in this average like, well, it's interesting but not really good. Next up is INXS's 1997 album Elegantly Wasted. It's pretty good, and depending on how you look at it, this is kind of their last album. They released one after the fact, but I don't want to get into it here. It doesn't really sound the same. They took a long hiatus because their lead singer unfortunately passed away after this album. And then they came back and released another album. But anyway, that's not really important. This should be a good review, so stay tuned and stay minty.